Oops. Hang on.
Do we want to drop that question, Charnay, into the chat box while people are arriving, the prompt question?
Can you remind me what the prompt question is?
Yeah,
Right on the first screen.
It's right there on the slide. What
Perfect.
do you want to be thinking about? Very good. Thank you.
30 people registered.
Fantastic. Thank you. Good morning, April, Susan, Andrea. Hey, Jenny, Kyla, Alondra. Good to see y'all.
So promising to be on time and keep us moving. Good morning, everybody. Let's get this party started. Welcome to those of you that are here. We know that we'll have some more people coming in. So, and the chat box is starting to light up. So please feel welcome to use the chat box. Good morning to our leading and learning session for today. There's a prompt question in the chat box and also on your screen. We would love to get your feedback and your thoughts about where you're at today, and sort of get your head in today's space and help us to see what's going on for you. So what do you want to be thinking about for you and your organization regarding resilience? So if you can answer in the chat box, a couple of us will be watching for your responses. We hope you'll join us there for that. So good morning. This is Judy Neimer-Munn from NEW. We have Judith Mesfin-Johnson, our CEO here. Charnay Saunders from our wonderful partners at COACT is going to be helping as well this morning. Our colleague from NEW, Carrie Hemmerman, is doing another workshop this morning. So we are grateful in this partnership to have Charnay and her team with us. Our speakers will introduce in a minute. Some quick tips for Zoom and for what we're going to be doing this morning. The chat box is where we're asking you to be muted for the time, and send your questions there and let us know if you need some kind of assistance. There are 3 of us monitoring that, so we will help you. Also, if you can put your name by your face on the computer, it's just as simple as a matter of clicking on whatever appears in the lower left corner of your image and changing that to your name. We want it to be a friendly environment, so calling you by your name would be the most respectful way, at least in our view of things. We are recording this session and you will get a copy of it after. So make sure that you're on speaker view so you can mostly see the slides, because that and your speakers are who you're going to want to see. Our agenda for today is, again, welcome. So glad you're here. We'll go through a couple of things about why we're here and today's topic, as well as a lot of opportunities for Q&A. And we're going to actually experience the use of annotation in Zoom today. So we're going to ask you to actually participate on your screen. So let's move on with, oops, just jump past, introducing the 3 of us. Carrie, again, not in the room, but then welcome to our COACT colleagues. Charnay, who's helping us with a lot of the coordination this morning. And Kyla and Alondra from COACT. We're glad that they're here and we love our partnership with them. NEW, of course, is in Ann Arbor, but we operate all across Southeast Michigan region with a number of platforms that'll help you. If you might be interested, you can let us know before or after this session. You know, reach out to us. Our emails and everything will be at the end as well. But you can always reach out at info@new.org.
Hey, Judy, you know, we've got some interesting and fruitful responses to our chat, including a desire to help keep up morale, balancing human needs with work needs, assisting those we serve with resilience. Another leader here shared this question of how do we balance getting things done, productivity, and honoring the need for space and time to process grief and extreme change. So some similar sentiments. Another leader says, I'm thinking differently for myself and my organization, personally trying to find a way to be resilient and hold the need to support my children as they learn resiliency. And my partner, as he navigates unemployment for month 3, while also listening to my colleagues and making sure they are lifted and heard as they navigate an ever-changing landscape at work and at home. Thank you for sharing. And that that sharing is actually one of our norms of actively engaging. So we appreciate those of you who contributed and practicing deep listening. Also, just want to thank y'all in advance for your grace and patience, particularly in this tech environment. I think we've gotten better, though, I have to say, Judy, in the last 5 weeks. Children and pets are welcome, as are coffee and couches and whatever you need to be okay. We encourage you to use the chat feature. And also, as mentioned, Steve Frank, one of our esteemed guests, is going to bring in some interactivity. As with anything, I think we're all kind of in a learning environment, and we just encourage you to embrace the discomfort that comes with both navigating a pandemic. It was not in my job description, by the way. I see Rebecca Esselman here from Huron River Watershed. Both of us are brand new CEOs as of this year. Rebecca, the board did not tell me I'd be doing this. Go ahead to the next slide. So let's just embrace that discomfort and lean on in. So when Judy and Carrie and I were imagining this session along with our partners at COAC, we wanted to really push back on this culture of individualism that we live in and that we operate in, and to celebrate the benefit of being better together, right? Of valuing our togetherness as leaders and offering an exchange of wisdom and resources that could support us, not just in a pandemic, although this series is time bound and we will wrap it up, but to create and offer resources and support that could help us throughout our leadership journey. Valuing camaraderie and encouraging actionable things. So the thought was that we need timely, tactical things to be doing right now, things, skills and ideas that we might not have had in our leadership toolkit. I'm recalling that Karen Andrews lifted up in our last session that really the leadership imperative is one around emotional intelligence, not just managing sort of butts and seats, if you will. I think that was the word she used. And so I'm thinking of already how I've benefited as a result of a generous gift from a colleague, from Steve Frank's leadership. So I'm pleased to introduce Steve Frank, who along with Jocelyn Davis, is going to lead us through our session today titled Leading with Resilience Through Change. And Steve is founder of Evolution 360. He is a personal and executive leadership coach. He comes into that work with a background actually in marketing and branding for many years, but supports leaders in helping to ask powerful questions, which has been my learning journey with Steve, and I'm most grateful for that. And I'm excited to meet Jocelyn Davis for the first time, but you know, one of the things that we've been talking a lot about is how do we build the sector's capacity, and Jocelyn was actually Judy's former boss at another organization, and so we get to bring into this space, which we're so glad, the award-winning Jocelyn Davis, who's also an esteemed and accomplished executive coach, to be with us here today. So I'm so happy to have you. Thank you for the blessing of being with us this early morning, and for all of you. And Jocelyn, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yodit. And thank you, Judy and Yodit both, and Charnay for your help today. I'm really excited that you've asked me to be here. I have a special place in my heart for nonprofits. Judy knows that because that's where we met, working with a nonprofit. Very interesting, this topic of resiliency. So I want to define this for you as I'm going to talk about what I've come to talk to you about today. And I see resilience as basically the skill or the capacity to be strong under conditions of enormous stress and change. And that quality is usually not realized until the aftermath, right? You don't know you're resilient until something has happened, right? And then you know, I'm resilient. So saying that, we're in the middle of this unprecedented pandemic, at least for our lifetimes, right? Last time this happened was early 1900s. So this is something that none of us really understand until we're in it. I'm going to talk a lot about your organizations right now as we try to come out of this with some sort of gaining from this. I do strategic planning a lot with organizations, especially with nonprofits and actually public entities as well, municipalities. And in doing that, you must do leadership training. You have to when you do strategic planning, because you're talking about organizational change. You're talking about leaders needing to activate parts of their leadership presence, qualities that maybe they didn't know they had, sometimes just to actually navigate the change. You're talking about building your teams, making sure they're high performing. And so I talk about this chart that you're seeing right now, which I call Mastering Sustainable Change. I believe there are 6 elements to building change that actually will last, and that when these 6 elements are present, your organization will run a lot smoother. This particular chart is very useful for nonprofits. For-profits, they even have a few more bubbles in there. But when I actually developed this chart, it was in response to the needs of a nonprofit. So let me just kind of go through this with you, and then we're going to get to some of the comments that were made there in the chat. Okay. The first thing is, out of all 6 of them, there's really no order after vision, right? But you have to have all of these elements in place in order to have this change be sustainable. The change for your organizations now as a nonprofit are that you have people, and I saw this in the chat, who you're going to have to work with your people, and they're grieving and they're nervous about what's happening. You know, what does this mean for my job, my family members who are here, who are not here, you know, with them. They're going to have those concerns, and that's actually going to be your biggest focus, is your people. And no matter what I talk to an organization about, whether they're private industry or whatever, my focus is always on people. It's on building confidence. It's on building relationships. It's on building confidence is key. And that is the confidence of the leader that then will translate into confidence for the team. And then the organization then flourishes because people then will strive for excellence if they're feeling like they're in the right place. So here, let's just kind of go through this chart a little bit here. Vision is obviously, every organization should have a mission and a vision and understand what their values are. We know that. But your vision now may change because some of these other elements are going to change as you come in. I know for a fact, because of my work with Judy, that resources are always a big deal for nonprofits. Where will we get them, right? It's you have these investors. Your investors in the nonprofit sector are, of course, your grantors, right? Your donors. Will your donors be able to help, continue to help? Will grants dry up? Who knows? So there's going to be this new norm that comes from understanding what resources you really have to work with, right? Going up to expertise, we have vision, and I say every organization has a vision. I'm going to come back to that. I want to say expertise, you have folks, I don't know, how many of you, and you can just raise your hand visually, we don't have to use any of the, you can if you'd like to use some of the tools here. How many of you actually had to furlough people based on the pandemic? Anyone have to furlough anyone? I'm not seeing everyone. I can't really see everybody. A lot of people are off camera, and I understand that because I have sweatpants on the bottom myself too. I just want to be honest. but
I'll see any hands up, Jocelyn. Just so you
didn't see any hands up either. But I do know that there are several nonprofits around southeastern Michigan that have had to furlough, and a lot of municipalities, and of course much private industry. So you're going to have, you know, the expertise. You hope it's still there. You know, you had a team before this whole thing happened, and now did they have to go find other jobs because they had to be furloughed? You know, that's an issue. Personal incentives, that's an easy one. Motivation, usually people think that's about money, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes a personal incentive is their access to you. So the issues that they're coming back with when they come back to work, such as grief, such as fear, such as, if they're extroverts, they're coming out of hibernation, and it's going to be, a lot for them to come into that. If they're introverts, they've been in heaven for the past 6 weeks in terms of not having to see people, and now they're going to have to be around people again. You're going to have all that to deal with, and sometimes motivation is just having access to you and to colleagues to be able to talk this through. So it's about having a strategy on when I bring folks back in, we don't just get right to business. And actually, I believe Steve is going to speak to a little bit more about the different things that you can do, activities that you can do to help people. So I'm going to speak more to the organization. The blueprint is your action plan. So that is obviously when you're doing strategic planning, that is, we have a vision, we know where we're trying to go, but how will we get there? What's our blueprint? What's our plan here? And then resources, again, like I said, is always capital. It's always an issue with nonprofits. That's, where's our capital coming from? But it's also time. It's access to leadership and to those investors that we talked about. It's information. That's also a resource, people understanding what's going on. So as you're bringing people back in, you're also making sure that you're giving them information about where the organization is headed now. Don't just walk in and say, let's go back to business as usual. You say, our vision may have changed a little bit here because our resources changed. So now our blueprint has to change. And the one that people forget, and I don't care what sector you're in, it's feedback. It's the ongoing evaluation. That's huge. So it's once you say, our vision may have changed for the organization, our resources have changed, maybe even our expertise has changed within. You have to come up with, here's how we're going to handle that, and then come back to it. Even right now, it's probably going to be weekly for a bit, especially to keep your team together. Then after that, you kind of monthly, we're going to get together and we're going to look at where we are, quarterly, and so forth. Judy, if you wouldn't mind, can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So this is another chart, and I'm going to get to all this, and then I'm going to ask a couple questions, and hopefully people will have had their coffee and we can talk a little bit. And that is that this sustainable change, when any one of these is missing, you see this effect in the organization. And this chart demonstrates that. If you have the vision and it's clear to everyone, great. You have the expertise, folks have the tools that they need to get the job done. They're motivated, they're paid what they need to be paid to live. They have access to what they need to have access to. They're motivated. There's a plan in place for the organization. The resources are there, and you're having consistent evaluation. Your progress will be sustained. The organization, you'll see change that is sustainable. However, if any one of those is missing, there is an effect. So I have the chart here, and I'm not sure if people were able to print it out or see it. It came in email yesterday, but I want to pick just a few of them out. One is that vision that I talked about. That's the first one. And if vision is not there, but everything else is there, you will have a confused organization, right? It's all about, well, we have resources, we have great people who have experience and know what they're doing, but at the same time, we don't know what we're headed toward. We've got this plan, but we don't, to what end? Where are we traveling to? And when that happens, everyone in the organization is just confused. So you have to keep that in mind, that we must have vision there. Another one, anxiety was the next one that comes from not having expertise. I'm going to move though to, with motivation, if that's missing, there's only gradual change. Let me say something about that. If people are not motivated, if they don't feel like they are being heard, and I know that came up in the chat too, that you want to, as leaders, be able to hear your people and respond to the needs that they're going to be bringing back when they return to work. And if you don't come up with a way to make that happen, gradual change will happen. People are not motivated to get in there and do something. Well, I'm not, I'm not being heard. I don't feel safe. I don't feel secure. And then the change is gradual. Even if you have a plan, the change becomes gradual. False starts is the one I really want to talk about. I have worked for an organization where that was the problem. There was great vision. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to change the world in this way. There was great expertise. Folks were motivated, they were well paid. They had access to great working space, all of that. And they even had resources. But the frustration was that the blueprint was not there. If you've ever been in an organization where the issue is, we have this goal we're trying to reach, but we are reacting to whatever resources available at the time. Well, that looks like a great way to go. Let's do it that way. So the whole ship turns that way and everybody starts going there. Then all of a sudden there's a big shiny object over there. Let's try to do it that way. And the whole ship tries to turn. Then what happens is you get a bunch of false starts. and it's difficult to make it to the end. I think Judy knows what I'm talking about. So let me just say this. There are investors in every sector, whether it's nonprofit or whether it's for-profit or it's public, as in municipalities. There are investors everywhere. What I would love to do is hear from anyone who's on the call, and that includes our hosts, anyone on the call who looks at this chart and says, you know, I have had this experience. I've actually been in an organization where the blueprint was not really spelled out, and therefore we did have a lot of false starts. Or whether it's the expertise wasn't there. We had a great vision for this organization. We even had resources, but we really didn't have the folks who could get it done. They didn't have the experience to get it done. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share on that? I'd love to hear it. You have to unmute yourself.
So everyone, I'm watching the chat box, and we can share your question that way with the speakers.
That's fantastic.
As many people in the room, so if you want to unmute yourself and make a comment. Yodit, I saw you unmuted. Did you want to comment with Jocelyn?
No, I was just going to do exactly what you said, which with a more intimate group, I think people could also come off of mute if they want.
Yeah.
It's good. I would love that. Anyone have anything they'd like to add? How about, because this is, you know, we're in such crazy times right now, has anyone had an issue where, even in your own organization right now, evaluation has not really been a priority? It will be now, but it hasn't been a priority? Anyone? Let me talk about that, and just chime in if you have anything that you'd like to add to that. Evaluation is one of those that's missed. I know in the nonprofit world, there are requirements for evaluation, especially with your grantors. They're looking for you to give them some feedback on how you spent their dollars, right? So that happens in that way, but that's not the kind of evaluation I'm talking about. You evaluate, yes, we had these programs, and since we were given these dollars to make it happen, here are the results of that program. It's the evaluation that looks at your people. You know, are you doing performance evaluations with your people? Every single person in the organization should have some kind of a daily metric, a weekly, monthly, yearly metric that they're working with. And the only way to do that is to actually be evaluating people. And I don't mean the kind, you know, are you doing the, it's what do you need to get the job done? How are you feeling about your training, about what you've been trained to do versus the responsibility you have to fulfill your work? Do we need to get you some additional training? You know, how are you doing when you go out into the world? Are you making relationships that need to be made? How can I help you? So understand that when I talk about evaluation, I'm talking about it from the point of a leader. And a leader evaluates not just so that they can reward and find out where they need to make changes, but also so that you can be an advocate for your team.
Hey, Jocelyn, we had a comment from a leader that setting clear expectations and accountability has been a challenge for them. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. That's the one. That's the one. That's exactly what I'm speaking about. Thank you so much for that, April. That does that as well. So when you do those kinds of assessments where you're asking the hard questions, I just created an online tool that is an assessment tool for performance. And I created it with nonprofits in mind. It's pretty funny because whenever I've been asked to use it with a for-profit, I have to modify it a little bit. That's just where my head is a lot of the time. But it asks for, you know, various types of high-profile competencies, operational competencies, those sort of things. And when you are working with your team and assessing where they are and how you can help them, it gives them their box. It lets them know, you're not saying to them you can't be creative, but it shows them this is my expectation of you. And they get to say, oh, I really didn't understand what it was. I had this job description, I was working from that. And sometimes just giving yourself a tool to help you, it doesn't have to be my tool, but any tool. Conversation sometimes on a consistent basis does the same thing. That's why I'm a big advocate of having meeting rhythms where you actually have meetings on the calendar where you are talking to your folks on a regular basis, even if you think you have nothing to say. Sometimes it's just their time to tell you. All of that's going to be very important when you get back into the offices. So I know that we don't have a lot of time. Here's another one. Yudit, I'll look at that. False starts negatively affect motivation. Yes. We recently worked on a large program proposal only to learn the funder decided against pursuing the opportunity. It was demoralizing for our team. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when I say motivation, that's what I mean. It's not always about money. Sometimes it's about successes. Sometimes it's about, you know, working hard on something and not making it. That's demoralizing, like you said. Um, as a leader, you actually have, there are tools that you can use to help you with that too. So that when you're working with the team, and you have to give your team the tools to be able to fail, right? The tools to
Mm-hmm.
fail. And evaluation, as I
Cut you
talked about,
off.
which is the,
I'm sorry to cut you off. If I could uplift another point someone made that's very relevant, saying they're working for a new nonprofit and we have everything right now except the blueprint. It has tied our hands when it comes to knowing what happens next, and reveals that we really crave and require structure, willing and ready, but it seems our hands have been tied. Definitely going to the point of what you mentioned, just how that blueprint is very important.
right. Why are the hands tied? Because of where we are right now with the pandemic? You're on mute, Charlene. You're mute.
That is from Jenny Jones. Jenny, if you would like to elaborate further more, please feel free to
Yeah,
unmute.
I just unmuted. Our hands are tied because we really would like to know what to go after next, but you know, we as a team, as a staff, we are very new. We haven't actually had a time to just like join together and meet like for a weekend retreat or anything like that. We started everything, we were excited, but now it comes time to like figure out, okay, next item, how do we, you know, effectively work together? How are our schedules? You know, some of us are awake at like 2 o'clock in the morning. Some of us are awake at like right now. So, you know, moving forward with even like communication and how to work together, we don't have that format in place, and we're just kind of like, whatever comes next, let's just tackle it, you know, and you know, blueprint.
Jenny, are you the leader of these organization?
I am part of development and administration. I am
Okay.
not an ED.
Yes. So you're part of the leadership team. In other words, yeah.
Yes.
So this is, first of all, it's, I don't know if anybody used to watch the cartoon G.I. Joe when they were little, but there's this saying that's knowing is half the battle, right? So I'm really happy that you understand that that's what's missing, because sometimes people don't know. In fact, that's probably how Steve and I probably see our most of our clients is, they say, we don't know why this isn't working. And we have to come in and say, okay, analyze what's happening and say, okay, here's what it is. It's that your blueprint is not really solid here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my advice to you, Jenny, is that you know that that's missing, that that's something you're working on. Right now, we're kind of closed down. I get it that you're still managing from home, you're managing from your office, but this is the time to start looking at, but you're gonna have to ask yourself those other questions. Has the vision changed for the organization? Are our resources still there? Is my expertise still in place? You're gonna have to ask yourself all those questions, right? Our resources. Am I able to still motivate my group? And I'm talking about the basics, like, will I be able to pay them if my resources are low, right? Am I going to be able to bring them back to this office? I have one nonprofit client right now that has to move. They cannot stay where they are because they haven't been able to pay for their space. They're actually going to have to move. They furloughed almost all of their employees. I mean, they're really in trouble right now. So right now we're talking about that. We're looking at what has changed so that now we can figure out how to motivate the employees, right? How to get that motivation there. Thank you so much, Jenny, for that,
Thank you.
for sharing that. I want to respect the time. Judy, how are we now? Do I need
Yeah,
to move on?
why don't we move on? If that's
Okay.
right? And, you know, let's see if anybody has, there's been some conversation in the chat room. Rebecca's been commenting about how doing stretch goals in this time frame and the anxiety that can come from that when the expertise isn't there, right? Do you want to speak to that, Jocelyn? So Rebecca is the one you're speaking to, but obviously all of us could benefit.
Certainly. Let me see her question. Is her question on the, here we go.
It's on the chat,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, of course. Yes. So Rebecca, what is your position in the organization? Are you in the leadership team? Rebecca, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry. I'm the director.
Okay, director. Okay, so yes. Absolutely. That's exactly what happens when the expertise is not there, and then everyone in the organization is anxious, right? Especially if they can see that the expertise is missing. And I understand that it's difficult because you're a nonprofit. It's not as if you can just reach into the cookie jar, and pay for some expert additions to your staff. But I would say dealing directly with the person who has to do the work. You're saying there's a stretch goal. Identifying who that team is who has to work on that goal most directly. It doesn't have to be the entire organization. Sometimes your admin staff can just come along with it. They're just in a support role and it's great. And it's working with one or two people, sometimes in a nonprofit, one person, to get them the skill set they need to work it through. So that's, things like, that's what me and Steve do too. Steve and I also do that, is working, one-on-one with folks to get them up to speed so that their leadership capabilities are there.
Jocelyn, can I offer something quickly there that I think came up a bit in the last session, and it's the difference between hiring for potential and hiring expertise.
Yes.
And sometimes we, because of limited resources, right, maybe hiring a candidate based on their potential, but then lacking, right, the expertise that's needed to execute. So there's a structural piece as well as the reality. So sometimes it's been beneficial to maybe bring in an expert to consult on that candidate, consult with that staff person who may have promise and potential, but not necessarily the expertise there.
Yes, Yodi. And I would also add that's hiring for potential is great. Like you said, it's also sometimes more cost effective. Let's just be honest, right? But it's no good to hire someone who has potential if you're not then going to nurture that potential. So you can't bring them in knowing that they don't have everything that you need in the role and then kind of hoping that they grow where they're planted. You actually have to do some investing. Sometimes it's not necessarily money. It could be time. It could be giving them the time and saying, hey, we're going to be working on X, Y, and Z soon, and I think that you need to look into this. Can you do some research on that? And what greater resource than online? There's so much online that you can find out. I know people thumb their nose at Wikipedia, but I'm telling you, I've learned some great things just on Wikipedia alone, let alone as many resources as there are out there for learning. So it's about making sure that when you do take a chance on someone who has potential, that you continue to help them grow and become that expert that you knew they could be. Thanks, Yodi. That's nice.
Desiree is offering a comment about being a truth teller in an environment that's conflict resistant, doing healthy conflict, right?
Yes.
Respectful engagement, pushing back on things, but then being a truth teller, being courageous.
Yes.
To offer comment, vision, a perspective that maybe is being missed.
Yes, and I would add this. Earlier, before we started this, we talked about emotional intelligence.
Right.
Truth telling, let me just say, this sometimes can be an issue. Truth telling is wonderful as long as it is tempered with emotional intelligence, right? So that's how conflict becomes healthy as opposed to destructive, is when there is also the addition of, I'm going to tell the truth, but I'm going to be conscious of what I'm feeling, right? How I manage that, reading the room, how others are feeling, or the person I'm talking to, and wanting to manage that relationship and nurture that relationship. As long as those things are also working at the same time, that's emotional intelligence in a nutshell, right? You can be a truth teller. But that's important to remember. Emotional intelligence too. Can't just
Excellent. Thanks, Jocelyn. We're going to move on. Okay. All right. Everyone, you can keep responding to Jocelyn in the chat. She'll
yes, all right.
But we're going to move on to Steve.
Thank you.
Tell us about this interesting picture.
Good morning. Can you go back one slide for a second?
Sure.
I'm just curious if anyone either wants to come off mute or in chat. If you had to pick a word or a phrase, what is it you need? What or who is it that you need to be as a leader right now?
Anybody respond in the chat? You
can respond in the chat. The other thing you can do, authentic. There you go.
There we go.
Courageous.
Consistent.
Positive. Fantastic. Fantastic. So you already, if you were looking at the slides, you saw my high school graduation picture. Judy, if you can just advance one slide, please. And good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And that is not actually honest, absolutely. That is not my high school graduation picture. You may be wondering why I have a picture of a baboon up here. And it really does relate to the question that we just posed to you. They have done studies that baboons are the closest primate to humans. And one of the reasons being that when baboons are born, they are born like humans without any preconceptions. Everything a baboon learns, they learn from birth on. And what they have seen when they study herds of baboons is that the baboons turn to the leader and look at the leader every 30 seconds. I'm going to pause there for every 30 seconds. The team, the herd of baboons, looks to their leader to gauge, does my leader appear stressed? Is my leader disorganized? Is my leader anxious? Is my leader happy? Is my leader calm? All those types of things, and they judge how they should be showing up based on how their leader is showing up. And that is what is so important for this topic about leading with resiliency. And I forgot, Susan early on in the chat made the comment that she's looking at resiliency for herself as well as for her organization. I believe it was Susan who said that. And it really is true. If you don't take care of yourself first, and I know there were prior sessions on self-care, you're not going to be able to take care of your team. And you are not going to be able to lead with resiliency. It's like they say on an airplane, and we will get on airplanes again one day. You have to put on your oxygen mask before you can put on anybody else's, or before you can take care of anybody else. And so as we think about how you need to show up as a leader, Judy, if you can advance to the next slide, please. Absolutely, you cannot pour from an empty cup. And that's a great quote, Yodit, and a great transition to the slide of quotes. What I've done here is I've put a bunch of quotes on this slide, and not going to read all of them, but I would love for you, you can either do it in the chat, or if you click on view options at the top of your screen, maybe at the bottom, depending on what device, you'll see once you click on view options, you can annotate. Put a check mark next to annotate. And what I'd love is just right on this slide, as you read these quotes, what behaviors do you think the author of the quote exhibited? And feel free to just put them right next to whichever quote resonates with you. But I'd love to hear what behaviors you think these people are exhibiting. And while you're doing that, Asandi, it is, while our teams may not be looking at us every 30 seconds, what's really important to know is they are looking at us a lot as leaders. And they are looking, of course, now we're working remotely, but they are looking at us when we get up from our desk and we walk through the office. They are looking at us when we hop on these calls. They are listening to us when we talk about how crazy busy we are, for example, or how stressed we are, or how back to back we are. And everything that we do and say as a leader has an impact on our team. So I'm seeing influencing, disrupting the status quo, for we must use time creatively. Pessimism never won any battle. Positivity. Positivity comes up several times. Flexibility, adaptability. Absolutely. Others. For me, one of the things that didn't come out here is a word. Key part of resiliency is action. What is it that you can do, right? And we're going to talk a little more about that. That really relates, I think, Rebecca's question around stretch goals. And when you don't have the expertise, perhaps, what is it you can do? What is the expertise you do have? What are the resources that you can connect with peers, with other organizations? Okay. All right. If we can, I can probably.
If we went back to that last slide, could we screenshot it for the notes?
Sure.
Okay.
I believe
I'm gonna just,
Charnay's capturing some of that for us. So
you got it, Charnay? Okay.
Yep, I just screenshot it.
All right. So I'm actually going to clear the entire screen then. Hopefully, there we go. And if we can go to the next one. So I've listed here 5 behaviors. I'm curious, you can do a check mark, you can put an X, whatever. Where are you spending your time right now as a leader?
So Julie is noting direct.
Direct.
A couple of check marks are coming up now. Oops, sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. Absolutely. So I see direct, listen, communicate. So these behaviors, what I will tell you is, it is, as you are leading change, it is really important to be intentional about which behavior you need to lean into the most. I see Julia saying engage. Absolutely. And all 5 of these, depending where people are, is really important. As Jocelyn was speaking and talking about what is necessary for effective change and the effect if any one of those 6 things is missing, blueprint, I couldn't agree more, is absolutely critical to effective change. What happens, and I believe we had some questions around there in the comments, are in a time like this, how much of a blueprint can you really have? How often are external factors influencing what your blueprint is? And so this first behavior around communicate is key. As people are anticipating a change, when people know change is coming, but they don't know exactly what that change is, you need to be able to communicate. We'll talk about powerful questions, and I know Yodit said it's something I talk a lot about with my clients. You can still, while asking questions, make sure you are communicating. It is the time as a leader during change to make sure people know what's absolutely true, not know what the rumors are. You need to communicate the truth. You need to correct rumors. And in order to know the rumors, especially in this virtual world, you really need to be connecting, engaging with your team differently, and listening. It used to be, and I'll date myself here, we used to know rumors were happening when we saw everyone gathering around the water cooler or gather at the office. Well, now people are instant messaging. They don't even have to leave their desk in order to talk about what they think they heard or what is happening. And so communication is a key behavior for leaders to effectively lead through change. Listening, truly listening. Just by a show of hands, and for those of you who don't have your video on, you also can raise your hand in the participant box by clicking on more, or you could do it with the reaction at the bottom of your menu. But I'm curious, how many people find themselves during these times listening, asking someone, how are you doing? and then responding with something like, I know, but we just have to deal with it. We just got to get moving. Show of hands. Anyone, does that resonate? Are people doing that?
I've heard it from people, Steve.
Mhm.
Maybe the organizations represented here, not so much, but I've heard from colleagues. Susan, by the way, is posting in the chat box that, oh, and Tamika raised a hand.
Mhm.
Susan posted about wasting the first month of the quarantine, trying to create a blueprint that was constantly changing and getting rewritten. In retrospect, it feels like a waste of time to build the plane as we're flying it and not give ourselves some time to see what the landscape looked like before trying to make a blueprint. I feel like I try to avoid that, to be honest. I try to listen and acknowledge what they shared instead.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. One of the worst, and the reason I ask that is, especially as leaders, we often want to solve things. Listening isn't just about solving. In fact, what I would say is, I encourage you to really, and in the resources, there's some resources about books and articles you can read on listening, really actively listening to more than the words, listening to what are the feelings, what are the values, what are the beliefs, and listening not to solve, but listening to truly hear is important. As leaders, we feel our job often is to solve. During a time like this, especially, anytime you're trying to build resiliency with somebody, to truly be able to listen to them is important. During change, listening is really important because sometimes people just want to vent about what they're losing, right? They don't need you to solve it. They just want you to hear and recognize it. And it can be really powerful to follow that up by say, what's the impact of that to you, or what would you like to do about that? Directing. I think directing and it is really important. Like even to the comment, and I apologize, Judy, I don't remember who you just said, talked about wasting time creating that blueprint. Directing is during change, you'll often hear people say, I'm working harder than I've ever worked, I'm getting nothing done. Does that resonate with anybody right now? I feel like I'm working so much and I'm getting nothing done at all, right? Or my list isn't getting any shorter. As a leader, you may need to direct, you may need to prioritize, you may need to say to somebody, let's not worry about 9 months down the road right now. I know we were talking about that before that. Let's focus on what do we need to do now? What do we need for the next few weeks? What do we need for the next month? So it's not that strategic thought and strategic planning stops, but you may need to direct people differently around how to think about it. Yeah, and give yourself the time and space for strategy and planning. Absolutely. And then engaging and coaching. And this is really where powerful questions come in. Again, as leaders, we often want to, it seems quick to just solve things for people. But as you're building resiliency, and I want to go back to the question again around stretch goals, being able to ask someone, what skill would be helpful for you? If you have someone working on something, they don't know how to do it, ask them, what skills would be helpful? What information would be helpful for you to make this? Where can you get that? Who do you know who possesses that skill or possesses that knowledge? This is also, as you think about engaging and coaching and leading through change, it's a great time as people say what skill they think they need or what information they need. You as a leader may know somebody you can partner them with. We don't need to do this alone, and partnerships are really key in helping to build resiliency. It's not just on you to do that. So I'll pause there for a second to see if there are any questions. Judy, Charnay, anything that came up in the chat that hasn't been addressed?
Definitely been addressing them. A lot of people have definitely responded yes, and it's been resonating. A few like kind of things to uplift. Someone mentioned so many parallels to parenting for those of us who have kids. What do you want to do and who can help you? Another leader said, and give ourselves and organizations time and space for strategy and planning and real impact and change. And
Mhm.
someone also brought up the point, yes, pause and reflection are critical and necessary, and they require us to push back on others' expectations to react right away.
Absolutely. So a couple things that I'll address there. Pause and reflect is a favorite phrase of mine. I talk about PRC. Pause, reflect, and choose. And the art of asking powerful questions is making sure you construct the right question. You don't want to ever ask the question that you don't really want the answer to. And parenting is a great example of that. And I see it all the time. How many times do you see parents say, all right, are you ready to leave? We're leaving in 2 minutes. And then the kid starts throwing a temper tantrum or they get into an argument. Well, what was the question the parent really wanted to know? What the parent wanted to know was, we're leaving in 2 minutes. What do you need to do to get ready? And so to pause, part of actively listening is getting comfortable with silence. You don't need to speak the second somebody stops, and then construct the question that you want to have answered. Another sort of silly example is, if I only have ketchup or mustard, I'm not going to ask you what sauce would you like for your fries. I'm going to say, would you like ketchup or mustard with your fries? I'm not going to ask my kid, what do you want for dinner? Because they're going to tell me ice cream, and that's giving them for dinner. So ask the question that you want. Powerful questions, a couple tips around powerful questions, and I know I want to be respectful of time and leave time for you to ask questions. Our powerful questions are questions that start with who, what, where, how. If you start a question with a verb, it often can be answered yes or no. And unless you specifically want a yes or no answer, it's better to ask a question with who, what, where, and how. Why is another word that is great for powerful questions, but you need to be really intentional about it. And I'd say even more intentional during these times. Um, and I'll just real quickly, they've done research and studies. If you're familiar with right brain and left brain, your left brain is your logical side, your logical brain, and it often gets defensive. And the why question triggers the left brain more than the right brain. So what I encourage you to think about is, how do you ask your why question a different way? When you say to someone, why do you think that? Or why are you doing it that way? It triggers the left side and the defensive side. If instead you can say, what are your concerns about that? Instead of why are you worried, it'll trigger the right side of the brain. The person will get a little more creative, but also be open to exploring what's really true about what they're saying, as opposed to getting in a defensive mode of what they're believing. And so being able to ask that, what led to this? What are your concerns? Those types of things are really going to help build resiliency in people and lead with resiliency. So I will pause there to see what questions. And I'd like to open it questions both for Jocelyn and myself. So don't feel limited just to this section.
And everyone, please feel encouraged to also come off mute if you would like to chat verbally or just mention in the chat box.
Absolutely.
Steve, do you want to
Yeah.
speak to, we'll have a resource slide at the end, and obviously everyone after the chat will get a resource document from us. But do you want to speak to a couple of the books that you're encouraging people to look at? And John, you had some books too, I believe. If you share what those are
Absolutely.
about.
And as you think about engaging your team during this time, one of the books that I put in the resource guide, and it may be hard to see because of the color, is called The Art of Possibility, and it's by the Zanders. What I love about this book is there are a lot of good exercises in here, and there's an exercise called Giving an A. And what it is the opportunity, if you're working on an initiative, you're working on a project, for example, you might say to your team, as you think about transitioning back to your offices when that time comes, once we're there and we've done it, and we're looking back and we give ourselves an A for how we did this, what did we do? What did it look like? And so you start thinking about where it is you want to go and how you want to do it in a way that gives yourself an A. It's a fantastic exercise for focusing people on where they want to get to.
I'll add another. I have loved this book, A More Beautiful Question. And the subtitle is The Power of Inquiry to Spark Breakthrough Ideas. And does sort of the same thing that Steve is mentioning. It actually has some good tips, exercises in there for you to do to ask the right questions. And particularly in nonprofit, where it's really important that we get to the root causes of things, as opposed to dealing with surface issues. I'm talking about when you're doing strategic planning, that sort of thing, that you're not looking at, you know, the results of things, but actually the root causes. This actually is very helpful in helping you figure those questions out.
Mm-hmm.
And then The Resilience Breakthrough is another one by Christian Moore. The Resilience Breakthrough, the subtitle is 27 Tools for Turning Adversity into Action. That's another great one around resiliency.
Absolutely.
And
Another
just
tip
so you
that I
know,
love.
the resources will be sent out to you. So if you aren't getting what Charnay is putting in the chat box, if you're not, if you didn't note those book titles and all that, we are sending it out to you as well. So copy it from the chat box if you want, but you will be getting it also in the resource.
Thanks, Judy. One last tip around asking powerful questions. You'll know you asked a powerful question when the person doesn't have an answer right away. And our natural tendency is to fill that silence by re-asking the question differently or expanding upon it. Don't. Really, and give that person the grace to be able to think.
Yes. I'll give a last word as well. I just wanted to say to each of you that resilience is about also having the courage to examine and cultivate what it is that you need to do, not only to take care of your team, but to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be key. The whole analogy, Steve, about the oxygen mask has never been more true than now, right?
Absolutely.
So just want to tell you that is the mark of a true leader, that you have that courage and that strength to do that for yourself and then for your team.
And both these things, resiliency and asking questions, they're not personality traits, they are muscles. And they can be built. Resiliency, people often think of as a personality trait. It is truly a muscle, and it can be built by using it. And if you don't use it, it atrophies.
Sure.
With that wonderful, powerful statement, I think I'm going to thank our speakers for today. Thank you so much, Jocelyn and Steve. You gave us some really great words of wisdom and some great resources that we can look into and act on going forward. In the chat box, we've also put an evaluation form links so that if you could give us some feedback about that, would love to hear from you. Just want to remind you that we truly try to start and end on time. So we're about a minute over. So I'm going to maybe rush this a little bit in favor of getting you out. but we do have a next session coming up on June 3rd. We are going to have a discussion about nonprofit budgets and contingency planning and developing the strategies that will keep you to be firmly in the black. And so we have our news own CEO coming, or CFO coming. Ben Williams is going to be joining us, and Erica, oh gosh, I just forgot Erica's name. Anyway, so we have two, Erica's from UHY. So we will have that session on June 3rd. We hope you'll join us for that. Again, please take a moment to fill out the feedback on the link that we put in the chat box, but you will be getting a follow-up email from us that'll have this recording attached, as well as the resource document that Charnay and I are putting together for you. We hope that that will help you. We appreciate you participating today. You can always send us an email at info@new.org or contact any one of us via phone. Many thanks to our partners at COACT, and especially Charnay, who stepped up today. Girl. And the resources are on your last slide, some of them that Steve and Jocelyn noted, but there will be more. So watch for that document. Usually we send it out by Friday. So we're collecting all those resources. If any of you have resource suggestions, books, webinars, blog posts, anything, if you want to send it to either me, JMUHN @new.org, or at info@new.org, we'll make sure it gets into the resource doc. And with that, I'm going to close it out in favor of those who need to go and get on to the other work of the day. But we thank you all so much for coming.